Hello friends and neighbors, this is Matt Guyan bringing you my first ever commentary on BenGeek8408. I figured since the Twilight Books versus Movies review is taking considerably longer than I expected it to, I'd do one of these. You're under no obligation to watch, of course, but if you want a little bit of behind-the-scenes information of what goes into a Books versus Movies review, then watch on. Otherwise, you might be kind of bored by this, because I'm not going to be edited at all. This of course is the Little Mermaid. I built this up actually quite a bit. Not really intentionally, just because a lot of my subscribers already knew going in how I felt about the Little Mermaid. Like one of my very first vlog driver videos was a rant about how much I hated the Little Mermaid. I think I briefly alluded to it in another video, so a few people knew that I really didn't like the movie. And so, like I said, already going in, people already knew what the outcome was going to be. And actually, a couple people asked me, well, you hate Little Mermaid, isn't it supposed to be a review of shame? Well, no. Okay, I mean, you know that from the... But just because I hate a movie doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a review of shame. And just because... Also, just because you already know what the outcome of a Books versus Movies review is going to be doesn't mean that the Books versus Movies review is not still worth doing, just to do the comparison and figure out, you know, what exactly is different and what's better and that sort of thing. This is the second time I've done this with Book Matt not being there. I did this for the Wayside review too, because he didn't think that the Wayside, the movie, was going to be anything good. And honestly, I didn't, but there you are. Yeah. I got a few comments regarding how angry Book Matt is in this review, and he is a little bit more ranty than usual. I mean, Book Matt's already a little bit more uptight than Movie Matt is, but he is a little bit more ranty than usual in this one. But I mean, it almost had to be that way just because of how much I've built up my hatred. New intro, yay! How much I've built up my hatred of the Disney movie. It almost had to be that way, but fortunately I had, you know, Movie Matt to kind of balance him out. And it's interesting because the Movie Matt persona, which I essentially created for these reviews, the Movie Matt persona is actually closer to what I'm like in real life. Regular Matt is more like what I was like 5 years ago. You know, very much a book purist and kind of, you know, books will always be better than movies, and movies can never be as good as books, and that sort of thing. And I've kind of changed my tune since then, and I've started to look more, really recently, I've started to look more at how movies can be a really viable medium of storytelling. So I'm more like Movie Matt or the Mad Hatter. I'm a little more open, a little bit more objective in my judgments and that sort of thing, or I try to be. But I still do have some kind of purist opinions. I think we all do to a certain extent, and certain aspects of Little Mermaid really do rub me the wrong way. This wasn't the longest Books versus Movies review I've ever done. I think it's either Prestige or V for Vendetta, which I did with Jesse. I don't, but this is the longest round one I think that I've done. I don't really keep terribly accurate, but this round one was almost 10 minutes long originally. I pared it down quite a bit. Just because when it comes to the differences, like the main differences between the movie and the book, that I kind of really take issue with, Ariel's the big one. Like the main character, that's the big issue that I kind of, I just don't really like. And the thing is, rewatching it, I found watching it again for this review, I don't hate it as much as I used to. I really don't. And like for the first hour or so of the movie, first hour, I was really kind of enjoying it. It's really just in the last bit of the movie when it emerges that Ariel gets exactly what she wants, having learned nothing. That's when I kind of, okay, let's. But I mean, like for the first hour or so, you know, Ariel is an engaging character. She's, you know, really quite charming, and she has really relatable qualities, especially for a 16-year-old girl. You know, she kind of has she has a magnetism. And she's attractive for an animated character. We'll throw that out there too. But she has magnetism, and I can see why a lot of people were kind of drawn to her character and drawn to her drama. And I was too for the first hour, and then she kind of blew it because she was exactly the same at the end of the movie as she was at the beginning. And she, she has definite flaws, and they're not really addressed. And I think that's my main problem. Um, but like I said, like if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have given you like a whole list of bullet points about why this movie was so horrible. And now I can say, okay, it's not horrible. There are a lot of good things about it. The Ursula is wonderful. I love the character of Ursula. And just you look at the animation, you can see why this movie really um, helped with the Disney Renaissance. I still maintain that Who Framed Roger Rabbit really kind of sparked the interest in Disney animation again. But Little Mermaid retained it. Like Little Mermaid kept people watching. People kind of came back to Disney with Who Framed Roger Rabbit because that was really good movie and really kind of also innovative as far as animation technology was concerned. No one had really seen anything like it before. But Little Mermaid is what brought people in and kept them interested, and it's also what kind of put the Disney formula of the 80s and 90s in place. And the movies that had preceded it, they weren't bad. Like I've seen some of them. I've seen Oliver and Company. I've seen Fox and the Hound. They're not bad movies. At least I don't remember them as being bad movies. They're just kind of meh. It kind of feels like they were phoning it in. And with Little Mermaid, you have the engaging story, but you also really feel the quality of the work. Like you feel like I feel like with Little Mermaid, they kind of sat down, the animators and the creators and everyone, they kind of sat down and said, okay, guys, we're floundering. What can we do to gain interest back? Well, what did we do the first time? What did we do back in the beginning? They look at the animation in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and how innovative that was for animation. And actually, you could probably draw a lot of parallels between Snow White and the Little Mermaid in terms of what they did for the genre, both for the animation genre and for the Disney genre. And Disney really is kind of a genre. This is and the reason why this round is so long is because a lot of the stuff that I talk about in this round I probably could have talked about in the story round instead, but the ideas of like the protagonist and the story are so firmly intertwined in the story because the story is about the Little Mermaid, of course. And so when I'm explaining the differences between the two Little Mermaids, I'm basically outlining the story elements that are, all the story elements that are different. So this is pretty much everything here. This is the main rant right here. This is the main Ariel rant, and I actually pared this down a lot. Like there was about a minute and a half more of stuff that I said. Some of it I actually made the same points later, so I just cut it out because it wasn't necessary. And some of it was just it wasn't really conducive to what I had already pretty much made my point. I didn't need to go any further, and it was too for all the people who are saying Matt was really ranty in this one. Matt was really angry in this one. If I'd kept everything in it, I would have been a lot angrier. Like it would have come off as a lot angrier, and I wasn't really comfortable with that. First, because I didn't want to alienate people. I really don't want to alienate people with my reviews. And I just wasn't comfortable with that image. I mean, yeah, Book Matt is uptight, but I still want to keep him at least somewhat reasonable, even if he's not the reasonable half of this particular debate. Well, but like I said, I have to rant a little bit about this because of how much I unintentionally built up how much I hate this movie. Yeah, and I still think that these are pretty much in the end two redeeming qualities. In the first hour, she has other redeeming qualities, but here, it's just at the end of the day, it's like okay, she looks nice, she sounds nice, but that about covers it. Yeah. And again, I feel like Movie Matt kind of balances him out, because he's a little bit more reasonable. And like I say, I really am more like Movie Matt in this instance. And you'll notice Movie Matt does take a few digs at the movie as well, and at Disney. I couldn't resist, but they're more just kind of playful pokes at the genre. I do kind of have a love-hate relationship with Disney. I think I've said that before. I just I recognize that not only have they produced some really good movies, but they're a huge part of our Disney's a huge part of our culture. It's inescapable. Like it really is. No other movie studio is like it. It's a, I love that. That's exactly what I was, as soon as she said that, that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, it was like, it's too easy. And then she came on and said that. It's like, yeah, that's perfect. I'm totally going to use that. Yeah. But anyway, Disney really is kind of this huge cultural phenomenon. It's its own genre. You really can't say that about any other movie studio. I mean, Universal's got a theme park, okay, and Warner Brothers tried for a while with Bugs Bunny to kind of be, have that mascot like Disney had Mickey, but they abandoned that pretty quickly. There is nothing else like Disney. Like, it does kind of exist in its own little world. It's fascinating to examine, and I love looking at it. But you can't deny that there are some serious issues with Disney as well, and you can say that about any movie studio. Like, my thing, I say Disney's produced some masterpieces and Disney's produced some crap as well. And, well, you can say that about pretty much any movie studio. Um, but Disney also has like the formula. That's their big thing. There's the Disney formula, the Disney genre. You say something is a Disney movie, you instantly know what they're talking about. You're talking about the Disney formula, and this movie I think really captures it to a T. And at some point in the future, I'm going to do like a Disney versus fairy tales, where I look at all the different ways that the fairy tales differ, and you'll find that there are a lot of really distinct patterns. If you look at all, there's basically six of them. There's Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. And if you look at all of them and you look at the various ways that they all deviate from their source material, there are some definite patterns. Like, there's definitely a formula to it. I mean, even just looking, I mean, it's a slightly different formula when you go from the old Disney fairy tales to the Renaissance Disney fairy tales, but it's still essentially the same. This is my one beef with Ursula. It's not with the character itself, just the fact that, the Sea Witch in the original story is not an antagonist. She's not evil in any way, and they made her evil. And that doesn't bother me so much as the prince fell in love with another girl besides the Little Mermaid, so she must be evil. That I think that bothers me more than the fact they made the Sea Witch evil. But I'm okay with. I was less okay with that, like I said, 5 years ago, when I was first doing these rants. But now it's like, the character of Ursula is just such a wonderful villain. I can overlook the fact that they that they did that.
But aside from that, Ursula is just a kick-ass villain, cleverly playing off the
I love the design. I didn't talk about the design of Ursula, but the whole half woman, half octopus thing. I think that's just brilliant. And apparently she's modeled after a drag queen. I learned that from the Nostalgia Chick.
But how about the other characters from under the sea and on the land?
This is one of those categories, and there are a lot of these actually in books versus movies reviews that I do. There are a lot of categories where I'm on the fence. Like, I could argue either side. This is one of them. When I did the Prestige review, well, I didn't do it. My evil twin did. But when that review was done, um, I think both Borden and Angier, both those two characters could have gone either way. They were both about equally good in the book and the movie. Um, but, I mean, they're basically two ways that books versus movies reviews decisions happen with regards to who's going to win overall. Either I will know immediately after finishing the book and the movie, I'll know immediately, okay, this is the one I like better, let's figure out why. Or I won't know. Like with V for Vendetta, I honestly didn't know. When I finished reading the book, I was like, well, I could go either way on this. So I had to actually sit down and piece together, okay, what did I like, go round by round and say, okay, what did I like better about the main characters? What did I like better about that? Blah, blah, blah. I kind of had to do that. And so sometimes when I have like a review where I already know ahead of time, like I knew that I liked The Time Traveler's Wife, the book, better than Time Traveler's Wife, the movie, obviously. Um, so if I know that going in, then I can plan the rounds in such a way that that going into the final round it'll be a tie. First of all, that doesn't always happen. Like with both of the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory reviews, that didn't happen, but most of the time it does. Unless it's completely unavoidable, I'll do that, and a lot of that happens through rounds like this, where it essentially is a tie. The round is, I could argue either side of it adequately, and this was the case here. Like if I had needed to, I could have made this a win for movie. Like I could have said, because it really is a matter of one side is more interesting, one side is more likable. And I could have made the argument that King Triton really is an interesting and dynamic character in his father figure role. And Prince Eric, honestly, watching it again, I was like, this is actually a pretty good love interest. This is a much more interesting love interest, especially when you look at the three previous love interests from Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, and Cinderella. Especially Cinderella. The prince in Cinderella only shows up twice. I mean, most of the stuff that the prince does in the original story is done by the king and the steward. He only shows up in the movie actually twice. He does nothing. He does even less than Cinderella. um, but yeah, with this one, not only is he more active and he does more, and he's a little bit more. He actually has a personality. But he also learns something. He really is pretty much the only character that does have good development. He actually learns not to, almost to the point where I feel like one of the big things they could have done with this movie is to just make it about the prince, to make it about Eric. Like that would have been fine. If they just made the story about Eric and his development and his growth and how he learned to appreciate what he had in front of him rather than keeping his head in the clouds. That would have been a good story, I think. But they needed to make it about Ariel. And that's another big difference, I think, that another switch they made going into the Disney Renaissance is that they started to make it about the romance, about the romantic couple. Because if you look at the original three, Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, if you look at those three, yeah, the romantic pairing is there, and that's the happily ever after, but this focus of the story is really not on the romantic couple, because the romantic couple is generally not very interesting. In Snow White, like, the interesting characters and really the focus of the story is on the dwarfs. In Sleeping Beauty, it's on the fairies, and in Cinderella, most unfortunately, it's on the mice, which I find terribly annoying, and the king and the steward, and they're trying to marry the prince off. Cinderella's a little bit more active in that one, but really not that much.
So now let's look at another saving grace from the movie, the imagery.
Yeah, the animation is just really, really fantastic. I could honestly, I could turn this movie on, I could put it on mute, and just look at it, and then like unmute it for the songs, because the songs are also really good. That's two places where I think Disney does consistently well. Their animation is top notch. Like they still have some of the best animation in movies out there, I think. Um, their animation is great. The animation for Little Mermaid still holds up. The animation for Snow White, I mean, the animation for the first full-length animated feature film, for that, it still holds up. It still looks really good because they put time, not because they were advanced in technology or anything like that, but because they put time and effort into it. They sat down and said, okay, how can we best use this medium of storytelling? And the effort really shows, and the effort shows here as well. And that's why I think they sat down and said, okay, we need to get back to basics. We need to put the same quality of work into the animation here that we did in Snow White, and people will come back to it, and they did. And then the other thing is the songs. Like, the songs in Disney movies are consistently just really, really good songs. These are good songs. The songs in the other Disney movies are good songs. Like, everyone knows Under the Sea. They might not know all the words, but they recognize it. They know Under the Sea. They know Part of Your World. They know Beauty and the Beast from Beauty and the Beast. They know Be Our Guest from Beauty and the Beast. They know A Whole New World. Like, these are songs that everybody recognizes. And then even just the scores, not even movies that don't have songs in them. Even just the scores for movies, like the pirate score is wonderful to listen to. Like, everybody recognizes the pirate music, and it's really, really engaging. I was originally going to have more of these moments where Matt went off on his, soapbox, purest soapbox, and Hatter had to drag him back. They just didn't fit into the script very well, and the script was already pretty long for this one.
The music is great, the animation is great, the protagonist is charming and has relatable qualities.
I really do think all of these things about the movie, like all these things that I'm listing about the movie, they really are great qualities of the movie. And this is another thing I should bring up now that we're at this point in the review. At this, before I would have been like, the story is wonderful, it's about sacrifice, blah, 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 the movie's terrible because it negates all those things and all that sort of thing. But now I'm not only able to recognize that there are good qualities to the movie, like the animation, the music, and so on, but I'm also able to recognize that the original fairy tale, the Hans Christian Andersen story, has some really serious problems. Like, huge, just awful, awful things in there. You know, first of all, the religious symbolism is just so incredibly, it's so obvious. Like he's practically shoving it in your face. It's just difficult to read. It's incredibly depressing. I mean, it's kind of meant to be that way, but it is incredibly depressing. And then just the ending. The ending, I really did find the ending pretty disturbing when I read it, because I had forgotten that he said that at the end about the kids, you know, crying every time a kid cries. You know, I'd completely forgotten about that. I just remembered, oh, the Little Mermaid dies, she becomes the spirit of the air, she goes off to help people 300 years of service, she gets an immortal soul. I'd completely forgotten about that ending. And then I reread it, and was like, oh yeah, he did put that at the end, didn't he? And it's just, it really is kind of disturbing. Yeah, and that's true of a lot of fairy tales. They're not perfect by any means. There's actually a uh, pretty well known in the fairy tale world anyway. Pretty well known fairy tale scholar called Jack Zipes. He's published a lot of things, a lot of fairy tale commentary and that sort of thing. And he has a lot of great things to say about fairy tales. But one of his soapbox issues is Disney and what Disney has done to fairy tales and how they've tried to cram these fairy tales into the formulas, which is true to a certain extent. But you also got to recognize that a lot of these fairy tales aren't that great. You know, they have, you know, either they have bad messages or they're badly told. There are a lot of great fairy tales out there that are really obscure. Some of my favorite fairy tales are not very well known. East of the Sun, West of the Moon is not terribly well known. The Six Geese or variations on that one. It's not terribly well known either. All Furs, or whatever the German equivalent of that. There are a lot of great fairy tales that are really well known, that are not really well known, but the ones that are well known are the ones that really aren't that great. They have some really disturbing elements in them, and Little Mermaid definitely falls into that category. Yeah. Yeah, and my problem isn't that they change things so much. It's that they change things. It's that they eliminated those disturbing elements and they eliminated those things, but they didn't replace it with anything of equal value. Like they just said, "Oh, let's you know just focus on this romance that isn't really a romance that has no basis in reality whatsoever." I think that's what bothered me more than anything. And then their next fairy tale movie, Beauty and the Beast, was just brilliant in so many ways because it wasn't a love at first sight or an infatuation type of thing. It was the relationship developed, which is why I love Beauty and the Beast as much as I do. And there will be a books versus movies review on Beauty and the Beast, by the way. That will come at some point later.
Preposterous exercise. Wasn't
Preposterous.
preposterous. Everyone knew going in that
I don't know why I said preposterous. It just seemed like the right word for what I had just done.
Like a raving purist. Although you still did kind of sound like a raving purist.
Yeah, like I said, just because I already know what the outcome is going to be before I even get started doesn't mean that the books versus movies review isn't worth doing, because it's not so much a competition as it is to discover, yeah, this was pretty obvious, this here. But, oh well, I had to do it. That joke I stole from Jesse. Pretty sure he did that when he had to do his Eclipse review. And that's it. Thanks for joining me if you stayed all the way through.